As long as theme parks have been around, it's completely normal that they're going to change over time. It takes a long time to get to a full-size park, so you're constantly going to have additions and maybe some remodels, and sometimes new attractions are not quite as successful as the parks maybe had hoped, so they've got to be swapped out. But I've only been in Florida for less than a year, and even I can tell that I think we're reaching an extra abnormal period. It seems like we're entering a completely new age of theme parks right now, as almost every single park in Florida has been going through some major changes recently. Some of those changes include Magic Kingdom removing the entire riverboat, the rivers, and Tom Sawyer Island to make way for a new Cars attraction, which, if you ask me, might be the worst update out of all of these. I guess Disney was looking at Magic Kingdom and they thought, you know, we want to put in a new Cars attraction. We've already got a really crappy Cars attraction in the park, taking up a huge plot of land, but no, we want to keep that one. Let's rip out the most beautiful part of the park first, and we'll put another Cars attraction. And then over at Animal Kingdom, they're ripping out the entirety of Dinoland, which is probably not the biggest deal. That whole area never looked that great anyway. Although the dinosaur ride there is one of the best arc rides around here, so I'm definitely going to miss that one. Epcot just completely updated Test Track again, which I just got my first ride on last week. Hollywood Studios is ripping out the entire Muppets courtyard as well as a few restaurants. They just added 2 new shows and are redoing Rock and Roller Coaster, which I'll be honest, the whole Aerosmith theming there feels kind of cheesy and outdated, but then again, I don't think that Muppets is going to be any better. And then you look over at SeaWorld and they've added a new ride every year for 4 years now, and now Universal's ripping out one of their largest roller coasters, getting rid of Rip Ride Rockit, which is why we have the Farewell Tour shirt. I feel like this shirt kind of applies to all the things that are going away right now. And then to top it all off, we got a brand new theme park with 11 new rides from Universal. So clearly 2025 is a huge year for changes in these parks. It feels like I'm constantly rushing over to do something for the very last time before it's gone, or I'm rushing in to be one of the first to experience the new thing that just came out. But to be honest, I'd rather have this Florida situation than what Six Flags is going through right now, where they're mostly just tearing down a bunch of rides. But all of this kind of brings up the question, is all change good change for these parks? Because every time you see one of these new changes being announced, there's always so many people in the comments who are really upset that they're getting rid of their favorite attraction. But then it's also countered by a whole bunch of people that just say, oh, you're just scared of change, you just will hate anything that changes, but once the new thing comes out, you'll forget all about it and you'll be happy. And I mean, some of that is kind of true, but not always. Now, yes, there have been a lot of attractions in the past that are not very popular with most people, but a few people are going to really attach themselves to it. But if these parks could never get rid of anything that people were attached to, then we would never get rid of any attractions, no matter how bad they are and how much space they're taking up. So all of this gets me wondering, like, were the parks better way in the past? You know, there are a lot of people with rose-tinted glasses that like to say, like, oh, these Disney parks were so much better in the 90s. Like, I wish I could go back to the old days. Things were so much better back then. So let's bring that up a little bit. One thing that people mention a lot is the old rides that are gone now. It's actually kind of funny when you go into Universal Studios these days, because there is so much mention in the parks of Jaws and Back to the Future and Ghostbusters and Beetlejuice, yet the park doesn't have a single attraction for any of those things anymore. And so it gets you wondering, like, okay, if these were so popular, if these were such good rides, then why do they have to get rid of them? If I asked you if you wanted to go back in time to, let's say, the year 2000 and go back to the way the theme parks were in those days, I think most people would want a nostalgia trip to do it once or twice, but I think that you would get bored of the parks a lot quicker because, let's be honest, the parks are just a lot better these days. At least attraction-wise, they are. I think one of the biggest things people bring up about the older parks is that the customer service experience was a lot better back then. Another thing people mention is that, oh, the parks were so much more affordable and the crowds were not nearly as bad back then. And you get people who are like, oh, adjusted for inflation, a ticket to Magic Kingdom opening day would only be about $50 in today's money. But you have to stop them and say, like, yeah, but Magic Kingdom on opening day did not have everything that's in the park today. The parks have expanded a lot and there's a lot more to do in the parks. That's why you have so many more people coming. And I always think it's funny when people complain that it's too expensive and it's too crowded, because you can't really fix both of those things at the same time. Because if they lower the price, then they get more people coming. And people complain that they raise the prices too much, but I think that they're intentionally raising the prices to get fewer people to come to the parks, so that the fewer people who can come will actually have a better time. And so I see so many people these days that are like, oh, Disney is failing, like they're not getting as many people in the parks, it's because they're just overcharging people. And I'm betting that a lot of the Disney executives are like, yeah, that's kind of the point. Our parks are way too crowded and it's causing problems and nobody's having fun. Another thing I've heard people talk about is the old Fast Pass system. They had a system where instead of lightning lanes and like paying for Fast Passes, you would just show up to a ride, grab a ticket, They would give you a return time, and then you could come back and skip the line. And so there were a lot of people who figured out how to game the system and like pick up a whole bunch of fast passes, and then they could basically skip all the lines that they wanted. And so people today think like, oh man, that would be so cool if they brought back that system. Like I would just be skipping lines everywhere. However, we live in a different era these days. So back before the internet, if you were somebody who was extra savvy and knew all of these theme park strategies of how to beat the crowds, how to go to just the right spot before everyone else, how to check the wait times and all of that, you were way ahead of the curve, because most people would just wander into a theme park with no idea what they were doing. They would just wander to the nearest thing and get in line. But nowadays, nearly every person in the park is checking their phone for the wait times. If you tried that old fast pass system these days, it would not work, because everyone would just rush it right away, and then they would all be gone instantly. So it is kind of an unfortunate reality that we live in a different world now. So there really is no going back to those old versions of these parks. But you also have to wonder, like, okay, why are there so many more people coming to these parks these days? Like, it seems like every year the attendance just kept going up, at least up until 2020. And I think part of that has to do with, I don't think this gets talked about a lot, but countries outside of the US have really been pushing themselves out of poverty the last few decades. So while in the 70s and 80s, it was mostly only Americans who could afford to go to these theme parks, nowadays we've got people from a lot of other countries, especially around South America and Asia and Europe, who can now afford to come to our theme parks. And so a combination of like a larger world population, a smaller percentage of world poverty, and cheaper access to traveling, and the internet really advertising for all these theme parks, it's no wonder why there are so many people from all over the world who are flooding into one spot. I have to wonder if we'll just get more theme parks built worldwide so that people can just go to the one nearest to them, so that we don't all have to be fighting over the same spot, but I guess only time will tell. But this also doesn't just apply to theme parks. And before I moved to Florida, I lived in Salt Lake City, Utah. And if you know anything about that area, there are a lot of ski resorts around there. And people over there are giving the same complaints, how it's like, oh man, when I was younger, I used to be able to just show up to the mountain. It was super cheap. I could just ride all day. There was hardly any people there. And now I can barely get in because it's so crowded and it's so expensive. Well, basically what happened is you used to be able to enjoy the nicest parts of the world until the rest of the world found out about it and also wanted a piece of that. So now you have to share. So with all of this new pent-up demand for entertainment spots, with ski resorts being way overcrowded and now theme parks also being overcrowded, it gets you wondering, like, why are they just not building more stuff? Like I said, instead of having everyone crowd into the theme parks in just Florida and California, how come we're not seeing a bunch more theme parks being built all around the world since people want to go to them so bad? Well, I can't really speak to a lot of global markets, but at least in the US, it's been kind of a weird shift, because remember how I was saying that Six Flags has been tearing down a lot of their rides right now? Well, right now it seems like everyone has been just flooding into the Disney and Universal parks because they are so far ahead of the competition. They're able to build the best stuff that everyone wants to do, and it's really hard for anyone to catch up. And you'll notice that hardly any theme parks have been built in the last few decades. It was actually a pretty big anomaly that Epic Universe was just built, but that was built by a company who already has a ton of money and knows what they're doing. But I think a big reason why you don't see a lot of new parks being built is that there's just not enough cheap land to go around. At least not in populated areas. It does seem like the US these days has basically all been claimed, and the price of land has gone up. Also, the price of building materials has gone up a lot too. And like I said, the competition going up against Disney and Universal is just an impossible task. You know, 50 years ago, you could start a new theme park by just putting in a carousel, a Ferris wheel, and maybe a small wooden roller coaster. But nowadays, people's expectations are just so much higher. Now that people have ridden Rise of the Resistance, or Velocicoaster, or Cosmic Rewind, or all these crazy rides that are in Florida, it makes it so hard for any new up-and-coming theme park to really impress people. So where does the theme park scene go from here? Well, Epic is already on their way to expand a little bit more. Universal also has enough land that they could start working on a fourth gate at some point. And then of course Disney has so much land that they could start working on a fifth gate whenever they feel like it. But I think that one of the biggest problems that Orlando has right now is that there's just not enough people to staff all of these parks. Like the amount of people it takes to run the entire Disney and Universal scene, already it takes something like 100,000 employees, plus all of the hotels and all of the restaurants. And since a lot of those positions are pretty low-skilled, entry-level type jobs, they are typically not paid well enough to be able to afford to live in the area. So a lot of these luxury attraction places kind of hamstring themselves by building up so much demand and having so much money pouring into one spot that the people who actually run the spot can't afford to live anywhere nearby. So as much as I would love to say, oh yeah, build more theme parks and then keep them open 24/7, I kind of understand that there really just are not enough people around here to be running the parks like that. At least not in the current economy. You know, maybe when AI gets far enough, then they can run the parks 24/7. You know, while I was thinking about making this video, I kept thinking, I moved here in 2024, and it feels like one of the best decisions I've ever made, so I always wonder, like, Man, I should have done this like in 2012 after I graduated high school. But then I look back and I'm like, Florida never really caught my attention back then. And I think it's because there was no Velocicoaster, there was no Mako, there was no Tron, no Cosmic Rewind, no Hagrid's, no Iron Gwazi. Pretty much all of the best stuff around here has been built in the last 10 years. So let me know what you guys think about the whole theme park scene. Was it better 20 years ago or is it better today? And where do you think the parks will go from here? Also, what do you guys think about all the changes that are coming to all the parks? Are you hopeful for the new changes at Magic Kingdom or at Hollywood Studios or at Universal Studios? And do you think that Universal is ever going to overtake Disney? Or have they already overtaken Disney? I'm probably going to make a video about that at some point in the future too.